Hi everybody, it's Az here from Heel vs Babyface. Now BlizzCon may have been and gone and boo-hoo for that, but they have left us with a plethora of information about the brand new World of Warcraft expansion, Warlords of Draenor, and some of it has already filtered onto my YouTube channel. More information will be coming out over the course of the next few days, as only I know how to produce it for you. But today we're going to be dealing with the level 100 talents which Blizzard are touting at the moment. Now, do take this with a pinch of salt, because they did this with Mists of Pandaria, and let's just say loads of talent never made it to the final cut of the X-Pack. So this is their initial thoughts, their initial hopes, their initial ideas, but who cares? It's all good fun, and let's look through it. So I'm going to deal with it in alphabetical order, otherwise I'd just start with Warlocks, and DKs, you are first up. And your first choice is the Necrotic Plague, which was an ability by the Lich King, which is really cool that you get a boss fight ability. It's a passive ability and will replace your Blood Plague spell. It's a powerful disease that deals 100 damage, remember there's a number crunch, per stack every 3 seconds for 30 seconds. And each time it deals damage, it will gain a stack and jump to another nearby enemy if possible. So it can stack up to 10 times, but it can't be spread by pestilence, so you can't get it up and then go wee and whack it out to everybody. It's as unnatural ability as it is, needs to spread as naturally as it possibly can, if you understand that. But by the looks of it, there's no reason that when it's run out, it can't renew. So when a stack runs out, if it can jump back to that person, it can. So you can keep it up at all times and keep 10 stacks ticking, depending on how powerful the enemies are. Next choice you've got is Defile, and once more this is a Lich King ability from the Lich King fight. So again, another boss ability. How cool is that? Now this replaces your Death and Decay. It costs 1 Unholy Rune to use, got a 30-yard range, and has a 30-second cooldown. And it defiles the ground targeted by the DK, causes 100 shadow damage every second for 10 seconds, but each time it deals damage, it increases the area and the damage that it does by 5%. And this growth can occur a maximum of 3 times per second. So again, if you've got a lot of mobs, this could potentially get huge like Defile did in the boss fight. It sounds really cool indeed. I'd love to see this in practice. Can't wait for them to announce the beta. But yes, get rid of Death and Decay, get Defile on the ground. Oh my goodness, it could be awesome fun. And finally, you have Breath of Sendragosa. Now this costs 50 runic power plus 50 runic power per second, and it comes on a minute cooldown, and this continuously deals 2000 Shadow Frost damage every 1 second to enemies in a cone in front of you, and this effect lasts until you cancel it or you run out of runic power. So that, in a sense, is you can burst out loads of Shadow Frost damage if you use the Breath of Sendragosa. It looks like a very bursty, a very quick way to deliver the damage, but obviously because it uses runic power, it can get exhausted pretty quickly, certainly if you don't generate it often enough. So it's a kind of risk and reward ability, but once more, sounds pretty cool. The number crunch, don't let the 2000 bother you. Druids, you are up next, and your 3 potential level 100 talents are the Touch of a Loon, Will of Malfurion, or Might of Malorn, who of course was Cenarius' daddy poos. So first up, Touch of a Loon. Different depending what spec you are. So balance, you would gain Sunfall, which is a passive ability. And when you enter Solar Eclipse, it will transform your Starfall spell into a Sunfall spell and reset its cooldown. Now, I'm quite ignorant of Druid, so you're going to have to work that one out for yourself. If you're Feral spec, you get Lunar Inspiration. Again, it's a passive ability. Moonfire is now usable while in cat form and will generate a combo point and cost 30 energy. That sounds pretty devastating. If you're a Guardian form, you get the Guardian of Elune, which is an instant spell. It's got a 1.5 second cooldown. Requires you, of course, to be in your bear form. and it will instantly convert up to 60 rage into up to 5,000 absorption. So basically a big ass shield for 15 seconds. And this will replace your frenzied regeneration. And finally, because you have 4 specs, restoration, you will gain Moment of Clarity, which is a passive ability, and Omen of Clarity now lasts 5 seconds instead of just 1 cast. Will of Malfurion. Now balance, you gain the Zenith ability, which is channeled and targets all enemies within 60 yards. And this accelerates the caster's Moonfire and Sunfire effects, causing them to deal damage at the rate of 400%, what it normally does for 4 seconds. That sounds bonkers. Feral, you get Bloody Thrash as a passive ability. Now Thrash will also spread its rake to other damaged enemies as well. Great way to bash out plenty of AoE. Guardians, you get Malfurion's Tenacity, once more a passive effect, and this will increase your armor by 200% of the amount of your agility. Ow! Tanky. And finally, Restoration, you gain Germination, lots of shuns going on, which is also a passive effect, and Genesis now also extends Rejuvenation by 1 second after hastening it. So you just get that little bit of extra heal on your targets. And then finally, we have Might of Malorn. Now, if you're a balanced druid, you gain Equinox, which is a passive ability. Lunar and Solar Eclipse now last until the other is triggered, instead of ending at 0 balance, which is quite interesting. So if you want to stay in longer in one than the other, then you can. Feral, you gain Savagery as a passive. I know. Ooh, I like that from Hearthstone. Savage Roar is now a passive ability. Very interesting. Guardian, you get Bristling Fur, again a passive ability. All these are passive abilities. After using Enrage, the next attack against you will deal 50% less damage. A great way to mitigate incoming damage. And finally, Restoration, you gain Rampant Growth. Swift Mend now consumes regrowth or rejuvenation, but has no cooldown. So it's a good way to get burst healing out to multiple targets quickly. I was going to say burst damage, but I don't think that would work for restoration. Good way to get burst healing out to multiple targets really quickly indeed. Hunters, it's your turn next to get the level 100 treatment, and your offerings come in the form of Bowler Shot, Snipe, and with or without you, somebody at Blizzard got a U2 fetish. Can't wait to talk about it though. But first up, Bowler Shot, and a lot of people were hoping that the Demon Hunter from Diablo might make its way into Blizzard as a playable class. Sorry, it's not. No classes, no new races announced for the next X-Pack, but you can get Bowler Shot, which is one of their abilities. Costs 30 focus, got a 40-yard range, replaces Arcane Shot, fires a bowler at the target which wraps around them, and after 1 second it will explode, dealing 3,000 damage plus an additional 2,000 damage to all enemies within 5 yards. This is fire damage as well. Now don't again panic at the low numbers. There is a numbers crunch coming in Warlords of Draenor, so everything is exceedingly squished down. So 3,000 damage, 2,000 damage, they are going to be big numbers in the next X-Pack. Now the Death Knight had some of the Lich King's abilities, Necrotic Plague and also Defile. Hunters, Snipe is actually a card in Hearthstone, so it kind of keeps that whole Blizzard universe thing going. Now it's a 40-yard range, 2.7 second cast, probably modified by haste this, requires a ranged weapon, derp, and it will deal 150% weapon damage when it hits, but generates 60 focus. It's going to replace both Steady Shot and Cobra Shot, depending on spec. Cannot, though, be cast while moving, which the others can. Beast Mastery, it will also refresh your Serpent Sting, as it will to for Survival spec, and if you're in Marksmanship, it will also trigger the steady focus effect. So you lose mobility, but you gain focus by choosing this. But with or without you, really interesting indeed. Now, if you're Beast Mastery, you gain versatility as a passive effect. Now, it increases your pet's damage by 70%. Ouch. And they also gain the following new abilities regardless of their spec. You got Rabid, Spike Collar, Thunderstomp, Blood of the Rhino, Great Stamina, Bullheaded, Cornered, and Boar's Speed. But marksmanship, look at this. Lone Wolf, passive effect, increases all damage dealt by 30% when you don't have a pet active. I really like the idea of a hunter with no pet. You're basically just becoming an archer. And also survival, lone wolf effect, passive ability, increases all damage by 30% when you don't have a pet active. Hunters, let me know what you think of this in the comments below. Seriously, because I really like this idea, but I do think it's going to be quite conflicted within the community. And last but not least, for today at least, we have mages. And your 3 offerings come in the form of Prolonged Exposure, Focusing Crystal, and Falling Stars. Now, Prolonged Exposure is very intriguing for me. And mages, I'd love to hear your comments below on how you deal with this. Arcane, you gain Arcane Power, which is a passive effect. Casting Arcane Missiles extends Arcane Power by 2 seconds. Bear in mind, of course, Arcane Missiles is an RNG proc. So you have to keep timing them right to keep that extended. But what if you don't have the proc? Same with Fire. Kindling. Your Fireball, Pyroblast, and Infernal Blast critical strikes extend combustion by a second. So there is an RNG element involved in this too. Correct me if I'm wrong, mages, but I believe there's an RNG element with both of those. And Frost, you gain Thermal Void as your passive effect. Casting Ice Lance extends your Icy Veins by 2 seconds. You have full control over the extension of your Icy Veins, whereas the other 2 specs do not appear to. But again, mages, if I'm wrong, please do enlighten me. Next up, we have Focusing Crystal, a 40-yard range ability with a 1-minute cooldown, and this to me seems nuts. Again, comments below, mages, let me know what you think. It conjures a Focusing Crystal at the target's location, which is only attackable by the mage. The crystal absorbs the damage dealt to it, and after 10 seconds, it releases, it explodes, and deals 130% damage that was dealt to it, split between all enemies within 8 yards over 6 seconds. It seems a crazy bonkers AoE ability. I don't quite know how it'll operate in practice. It might be very clumsy. It might just be absolutely fantastic. But the proof will be in the pudding when the beta comes out and we can test these things. But initially, mages, again, comment on the Focusing Crystal. And finally, Falling Stars, which is really cool indeed. Arcane. You get the Arcane Orb, which is an instant ability and has a 15-second cooldown. It's basically Frost Orb now. Launches an Arcane Orb out from the mage, travels up to 40 yards and deals 1,000 arcane damage to enemies it passes through. It also grants the mage an arcane charge every time it deals damage. Fire, you get Meteor. It's 1,000 mana cost, 40-yard range, 45-second cooldown, but instant. Calls down a meteor which lands at the target's location after 3 seconds. It deals 10,000 fire damage split evenly between all targets within 8 yards. Also burns the ground, dealing an additional 2,000 fire damage over 10 seconds to the enemies in that area. Seems a devastating AoE spell based on the numbers of the crunch, which we're going to get as well. And finally, we have Comet Storm for Frost, 1,000 mana cost, instant ability, 40-yard range, 30-second cooldown, calls down a series of icy comets on and around the target, which does 2,000 damage split between all enemies within 5 yards on its impact point. Now, I'm trying to kind of get my head around this as a little bit different to Blizzard spell, but it kind of feels a wee bit of the same. But there we go. We have 4 of the 11 classes so far. We've gone through the Death Knight, we've gone through the Druid, we've gone through the Hunter, and we've gone through the Mage. I'll do the next 4 in alphabetical order tomorrow. But based on these, and of course they are preliminary specs, you know, these are not going to be set in stone. These are the ideas that Blizzard are banding around at the moment. Some may sound a bit weird, some may sound pretty wonderful, some may just not work when it comes to physical practice, but we will wait to see. I'd love to hear your first impressions of these. So please, all comments below. As you know, I cannot reply to comments because I refuse to open up a Google Plus account, which they are trying to force me to do. If you try and force anyone to use your product, it's a pretty safe bet. It means your product is shit. So I will be going through all the comments. I can still administer them, so don't be cheeky. And if I see anything of real good worth that stands out, I'll probably be replying to you on Twitter or Facebook, so do make sure that you are attached to those as well. But I hope you enjoyed this vid. Like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Remember, Twitter, Facebook, and twitch.tv/Heal vs Babyface for live streaming. And I'll be back with some more stuff very soon. You take care, everybody. Bye-bye.